As you know, the topic, it's understanding water and its harvesting. Water is a huge crisis these days, especially in our country, and every news channel is talking about the stress that we have as far as the water is concerned. So that is why we already have a Jal Shakti ministry in place to focus on the water and the water issues. But there are a lot of myths in the water sector, because water is something which is very easily understood. 99% of us, we say that water is simply H2O, and still we do not know a lot of things about water. So that's what we're going to discuss in the presentation today. First and foremost, as we have seen, we love numbers. So we talk about the numbers. This shows the amount of stress that we have. The underground water level is depleting. The rivers are drying. The perennial rivers are converting into seasonal rivers. Then all the water bodies are polluted to the extent that we cannot use that water for drinking purpose or irrigation purpose or for animal husbandry and things like that. So I'll first go a bit faster because that is something that most of us already know. If you have any queries, you can raise your hand. I'll go slow there. So this is something that everyone knows, and the reason is also obvious. We have higher usage and we have lower replenishment of water because we are just taking out water from the underground boring and all that, and the underground aquifer recharge is not in line with the amount of consumption that we have. So obvious solution is we'll recharge and replenish so that we can reuse. But when we try to recharge, this is what happens. We try to desilt the water bodies and they again go dry. We try to plant. We have a plantation drive, and then we go for rainwater harvesting systems. With half of the time they don't work, or wherever they work, they are still not recharging to the extent that the balance is created. So in spite of all these efforts, end resultant is zero. We are still parched because all these activities have been happening for last over 2 decades. If this was actually working, the today's stress situation wouldn't have arrived at all. The conventional ideas of rainwater harvesting, plantation drive, water body restoration and sewage treatment, all of them fail because of the basic ideology, the basic philosophy that water is a dead substance. We can treat it chemically, physically or biologically. This is where we go wrong because we don't understand water. Now, if we go as per Indian science, water is a living being. There are 5 key elements to life, one of which is water. 70% of our body is water, 70% of the planet is water, and the basic baseline which we need to understand is no dead substance can create life, and water is the key contributor towards life. Even the astronauts, when they are looking for life in the planets other than Earth, they are primarily looking for water. If there is water, the life is possible on that particular planet, otherwise not. Here are the key examples of how rainwater harvesting fails. These are all newspaper clips and these are from different states. It is not restricted to one particular state. Like this, 3 साल पहले जिस कॉलोनी में सबसे ज़्यादा रेन वाटर हार्वेस्टिंग हुई थी उनको अवार्ड मिला था, वहाँ पे बोरिंग जवाब दी गई है. दिस इज फ्रॉम Jharkhand. Then we have from Ghaziabad, which is Uttar Pradesh. Then we have from Madhya Pradesh. And the plantation drive, again, it is from Uttaranchal, it is from MP, it is from Jharkhand. So it is there everywhere. Now we are coming on to the water body restoration. I think it should be visible in the back. Yeah. So there are 3 processes that we primarily involve. for water body restoration. First is the mechanical dredging and desilting. Into this, what we do is we first do decantation, and then we put a JCB and we take out the sludge. Now management of the sludge is another problem, and then we refill, right? Now just a 1 acre lake, which is about 3 to 5 meters deep, will have approximately a volume of 12 crore liters of water. So when we do a decantation, this entire water goes waste, right? So that is one problem. And the sludge that we take out, again, that has to be managed. What do we do with that sludge, right? So that is another problem. Now in this entire process, while the process is quite tedious and time taking, and it takes a good amount of machine work, so obviously the tender value is also very high. But then ultimately what happens is, in a way we say that okay, now this water body is clean, but what we have done is, in the name of removing the silt or the sludge, what we have done is the topsoil of the water body, which is weathered for aquatic conditions, that we have taken out. So now the new soil which will come up, it will take its own sweet time for getting weathered up for an aquatic ecosystem. So for good 2-3 years, the biodiversity of the said water body will stand still, right? So that's a problem with the mechanical dredging. Then we come under the chemical process. Now chemical process, we all know that every chemical reaction has its own pluses and minuses, but bottom line is there is some residue. Now what happens to that residue? There is no chemical process to remove that residue or consume that residue within aquatic ecosystem, right? And third is the biological process. Now to understand this, you need to understand a little bit of what the previous speaker was explaining about importing the Italian bees. So whenever you are putting in a new species into an ecological system, it tries to create a space for itself. Now in this process, it will harm some other species of that particular ecology, right? So ultimately what you are trying to create is an ecological imbalance. Now whenever we are doing a biological process, what we are primarily doing the most popular treatment is the cyanobacteria treatment. So cyanobacteria we will culture in a lab, and then we'll put it into a water body. It will consume certain things, but it will also disturb the ecology of that particular water body. So there are pluses and minuses of each of the system that happens in the water body restorations. So in spite of restoring whatever number of water bodies we are trying to do under Manrega and under various Government of India schemes, things are still not getting to the extent wherein the stress is kind of de-escalated or de-stressed, right? Now one important case study for the invasive species is an interesting case study in US, wherein they have this Yellowstone National Park, which is a restricted area, and there is a very little habitation there. But when they had some sort of army testing or army installation going on, so there were some people who were residing inside the national park, and of course they had their own agriculture and their livestock and things like that. So there were a lot of wolves there. So all those people who were living into the Yellowstone park, they used to hunt for the wolves. Now wolves hunting eventually resulted into drying of a river. That is a complete video case study which is there. You can log on to YouTube and you can search for it. But there is a delicate connect between all the species which are there into one ecological system, one ecology. And that is what, once we disturb it, then we later on we come to know that okay, it has harmed something which is way beyond what we perceived it to be. Bottom line is, water pollution is neither physics nor chemistry nor biology. It is an ecological problem, and that is why it needs to be dealt with an ecological solution. Almost the entire government machinery believes that is the sewage treatment plant or the effluent treatment plant. Now, here there is a calculation mistake, because the entire design of a treatment plant is based on the volume of water, right? Now, sewage is something which every individual, irrespective of whether he is there in a rural area or an urban area, he will produce sewage. Every human being on a daily basis, taking a conservative estimate, generates about 33 liters of sewage. Now, human population is increasing, so sewage production is going to increase. So, if you put up a sewage treatment plant which is based on the volume of sewage generated, then of course within a stipulated time frame it is going to fail, because the production of sewage will be beyond the treatment capability of the plant, and that is what is happening everywhere. We had one sewage treatment plant in Dal Lake, then we had another one, then we had another one. Now 3 sewage treatment plants are working in Dal Lake, and you can go and check the quality of water of Dal Lake. It is still not normal, in spite of having 3 different sewage treatment plants. So any technology of water treatment which is based on the volume of water is bound to fail, because we cannot reduce the sewage production. Okay. Now there is another aspect to it, which is from our standards of water cleaning. Now, Central Pollution Control Board has got 3 different standards of water. One is drinking water, another one is bathing water, and third one is the STP outlet standard. If sewage treatment plant is supposed to clean the water, why can't we have a standard which is at least equivalent to the bathing water standards? That means there is a qualitative difference between the STP outlet and the bathing water. Then comes the capital expenditure. There is a huge capex. So half of the time in for the requirement of increasing the capacity, either the local government or the local body does not have the budget for expansion of the sewage treatment plant, or if the budget is there, it is not under the prescribed permission of the tendering authority, that okay, you have not taken an approval from such and such authorities. So that is why it is not scaling up, and the sewage production is increasing on a daily basis. So ultimately, because of huge capex also, most of the time a new installation fails. And then we have a high opex also, because everything is being done physically, chemically or biologically, and everything has a cost, right? So ultimately, if there is a technology which we know is going to fail in maximum about 4 years or 5 years, and this is going to be required forever, then that means we are investing into a wrong technology. So the problem is primarily we don't understand what we are dealing with. We don't know what is water, we don't know what is soil, and we don't know what is air. Ultimately, we don't understand the nature, and that is why we are standing here, wherein the government is talking about conservation of water, but what we say is we need to generate water first to conserve it, because we don't have enough water to sustain this entire operations of everybody living in this country for a very long time. So we need to generate water first, so that everybody gets drinking water. Otherwise, this year we had one Chennai. We all know that on a global scale, number 1 position is ours here, and even number 2 is ours, which most of the people don't know, that is Calcutta. The most parched city in the world is Chennai, and number 2 is Calcutta. And most beautiful part is that all the 4 major metros of the country are there in top 20. Delhi is number 7th and Mumbai is number 11th, right? And this is happening primarily because we're not understanding what we have to create, and we are not understanding where we are lacking. So now I come to the solution side. This is what everybody knew sitting in this hall. Now we are coming on to the side wherein this will be something new for most of the people. This is primarily the difference between the Vedic science and the Western science. Western science and Vedic science are different in the ideology. Like most of us would be knowing that the Vedic way of thinking does not have any conflict between the science and the philosophy, right? But the Western thought process is that the philosophy or the religion is always against the science. Okay, so the basic point is Western science is working on an ideology that we need to understand nature and we need to tame it. We need to take control. The Vedic science had placed nature on a very high pedestal to the extent that we were worshipping nature. Western science says man is supreme and nature is a process. The Vedic science says nature is supreme and man is just a component into that supreme gearbox. Okay. Western science says substances are dead and earth, water, and air, all of them are substances. Our science says there are 5 key elements to life. Chitijal, Pava, Gagan, Samira, we all know, right? And they are the basic source of life. Without them, life is not practically possible. Okay. Western science says water is H2O, that we all know today. Soil is dirt and air is a mix of gases. We say all of them, all the 3 components, water, soil and air, are living beings. So that is where there is a huge difference in the Vedic science ideology and the Western science ideology. Now we have tried almost everything from the Western science ideology in terms of treating the water or cleaning the water or restoring the environment and things like that, right? But we are very scared of the Vedic science because then you will be stamped as a particular section of people. So this is what we are going to understand here, that the Vedic science is probably much more holistic than the Western science, and that is why this has got a solution for an ecological problem which is holistic. You cannot segregate ecology, you cannot recreate ecology in a lab. It has to be there with all the natural elements. This is just about understanding a closed ecosystem from the Western science perspective to translate it into the Vedic science perspective. There was a research done on the number of human cells in human body. And they found out there are 37.2 trillion human cells. All multiple kind of cells put together. The number of cells which are there into the human body which contribute towards the body functions are this much. And then there was another research which was on the number of microbes or the bacteria which are there into the human body, which are independent of the human body functions. They are not human cells, they are the independent bacteria. And it was found to be 39 trillion cells. I've given the references of the research, you can Google it, you'll find it. So this gives us an idea that what is keeping us alive? Is it these bacteria which are independent of our body functions, or is it our own cells? Now, interestingly, the number of human cells of 37.2 trillion remains the same even in the dead human body. So, what is keeping us alive? Is it our own cells or is it the bacteria? So, we consider ourselves living because of these. Now, the most interesting part is they exist in water, soil and air also, in probably much higher numbers. So how can we consider those ecologies or those ecosystems as dead when we consider ourselves as alive? There has to be some balance in the parameters. So this is defining the life in soil, water and air from a Western perspective. I'll cover it later in the upcoming slides in much further details. Now I'm going to be specific to water because this presentation is all about water. Now let us try and understand it from both the perspective. Most of the people know that I understand water like back of my hand. It is H2O, two molecules, two atoms of hydrogen and one of oxygen. But most of the people don't realize that water doesn't obey the laws of physics. All substances on earth will shrink when they are condensed. Water expands when it is condensed. That is why ice floats on water, which is the condensed form, which is solidified. Now water is probably the only thing that exists in all the three forms, and water has got its own force which works against gravity. That is the buoyant force. No other substance is practically working against the laws of physics, right? Now I'm coming on to the scientific community now. There are some scientists which are Western scientists doing a research on Western science, and they're supporting the Vedic science in when they get their results. The first one is Victor Schauberger. He is an Austrian forest caretaker. He was actually he expired in 1956 or 59. Right? You can Google him. You'll get to know about him. He was the first one from the West who propounded this theory that water does not just flow, water doesn't just fall. Water has a specific way of movement, and that is spiral. Water always propels in a spiral movement. Then we have Marasu Emoto from Japan. He has done a wonderful research since 1982. He was trying to understand whether water reacts to the environment, and he has got a water crystal project. You can Google it or you can search it on YouTube, you'll find it. So what he did was he placed a bowl of water in a slaughterhouse and a bowl of water in a monastery, and then he created crystals out of it by taking just one drop and freezing it immediately and looking it under the microscope, and he could actually see the difference between the two crystals, right? So then he came up with this theory that water is able to understand the environment and water is able to respond. So water has got a stimulus to the environment. Then we have Jacques Bevinti, again a French scientist. He was discarded from the scientific community because he came up with this idea that water can listen to what you speak. Okay. And then we have Dr. Luc Montaigne. He is again French, and he started from where Jacques Bevinte left it, that water can listen. Now, because he is a Nobel Prize winner, so he cannot be discarded just like that, right? So he also understood what are the parameters between which he has to do his research. So he conducted the entire research on camera, right? He was the one among three who discovered the HIV virus. Now what he did was he took a strand of a HIV virus and put it into a test tube, and then that test tube, one drop was taken out and put into another test tube. Like this, he diluted it 24 times, which is technically, as per the log table, it is equivalent to one drop in an ocean. and then he recorded the sound waves out of that 24th dilution, and he made a wave file which was sent by an email to another group of scientists in Italy. From Paris it was sent to Milan, and there they downloaded this wave file and played it on a speaker in front of another test tube, which was a local water in Italy, local tap water. Now this test tube of water was listening for 1 hour that the same wave file which was sent from Paris. And after 1 hour of listening to that wave file, when they tried to recreate a DNA, they got an HIV virus. Okay, that means water was not just able to listen, it was able to memorize, and it was able to communicate and recreate the same virus, which was practically not possible, right? It is like you doing a research and telling me over the phone, and I am writing that the same research in another city. So what is the difference between water and me, right? Now this has been proven by the Western scientists. What we have been talking for over 14,000 years. In fact, if you would have attended a presentation of Nilesh Oak earlier, he has gone to the extent of 24,000 years with all documentary, oceanology and paleobotany and whatnot. There are about 18 different respects of science wherein he has proven that we are in the same landmass for at least 24,000 years. Now let us understand the water life cycle. What we learn in the school is the water cycle, where life is missing, right? Now what we are going to understand now is the water life cycle. Now we are trying to recharge underground aquifer, and we assume that underground aquifer is a water reservoir. It is like normally in the apartments we have pani ki tanki above your floor, and here nature always does opposite things, so they have made pani ki tanki below where we are staying, right? So that is our normal understanding, which is actually incorrect. There is no water reservoir below us, it is all flowing water. Like we have rivers on the top, we have rivers in the below the soil also. Like we have oceans which we can see, there are oceans on which we are staying also. We don't know what is the mix of land and soil on the earth. Somewhere water is coming out of the land, somewhere land is coming out of the water. Like you must have heard of Oceania. Just about 3-4 years back, it has been declared as the next continent, right? Where New Zealand is there. So it is coming out of water. So land is coming out of water, and water anyways, we all have been knowing borings and tube wells and all that. Important is to understand what is the origin of rivers. I asked my kid, Nadi kahan se aati hai? So she said it is the melting glaciers. I said, okay, how much of glacier is there that it is melting continuously for at least 1 lakh years and Ganga is flowing in the same direction? And the second question is, what decides? We are IT guys, so typically what we do is whenever there is a communication between two different stations, there is a protocol called OSPF, Open Shortest Path First, right? Now technically all intelligent beings will be doing that only, right? But why does a river flow in a specific manner? Why doesn't it go straight to the nearest sea? Why does Ganga originate from Himalayas and lands in Bay of Bengal? Arabian Ocean would have been much closer, right? What is deciding the path? The river below the soil is deciding the path for the river above the soil. Both the rivers are linked. Water is not just coming out of Gomukh, Because Gomukh, if you go there, there is absolutely no glacier at all. The water is coming from within the ground. And then the entire route map is decided from what all places water is coming from within the ground. Now what we are doing is basically by making dams and adding our pollution and sewage and everything to the river, what we are doing is we are choking this link between the underground river and the above the ground river. When it gets choked, when this link gets choked, the effect that we see on the surface is basically floods and droughts and rise in the sea level. Why this happens is because the capillary action works on the principle of pressure. Wherever there is a lower pressure, the water will flow from the higher pressure point to the lower pressure point. Okay. So if there is extreme heat on the surface, water will be pulled from the bottom, and that will keep the moisture content of the soil. So there will be no droughts. And if there is, the kind of extraction that we are doing, when the pressure is lower in the bottom, the water will travel from the surface body to the underground aquifer. Now this is not one process that you have filled in a tank and you have forgotten. This is a continuous process. That is an exchange which is always going on. So as long as this link is maintained, everything will work. So when this link gets broken, the entire water life cycle gets disturbed. And this is something wherein we are not working. In the name of rainwater harvesting, what we are doing, every concrete house will have some pipeline which will take out water, the natural rain, and it will go into again a drum kind of a thing which is punctured from multiple places, and that will be dumped about 2 feet or 3 feet or 5 feet below the ground, and this water will go there and it will recharge. Now recharging of water is not something which is which can be what do you call it? Segregated activity apartment by apartment. It is a link which needs to be re-established, which we are not working on. Okay. Now same goes true with the water bodies. When you have sludge, sludge is there in the bottom. The bottom is disconnected from the linkage with the underground aquifer, and till the time that link is not established, this recharge will not happen. Now typically people come up with the idea that okay, when we have done a desilting, it will automatically start recharge, but it doesn't happen because the topsoil is still not weathered. Now the beautiful part is what we are doing is desilting of a water body. What we need to do is desludging of the water body, because silt is a natural component. Silt comes naturally wherever you dig a small dike on the surface and you put some water. Within about 15-20 days you get some sort of smallest gravels which are called silt. They appear because the top layer starts to get weathered to this aquatic ecosystem. The silt is a natural occurrence which is required for establishing a link, and sludge is what we add in terms of all the chemicals that we are adding to the water. So what's the way out? The way out is we need to go ecological. Water is alive. As long as water is alive, as long as water has life, everything gets balanced on its own. One simple example is if you look at we've had a good discussion about farming and bees and all that. If you actually focus towards it, tell me something, does nature need human intervention to grow plants and animals? Obviously not, because before human beings all of them were there, right? So what is so different in farming that you need so much of intervention now? The chemical farming was one of the questions which was raised, right? Chemical farming or organic farming or Subhash Palekar farming, whatever kind of farming you're talking about. Why do we need to intervene from putting up the seeds, then adding pesticide and then herbicides and things like that? Why is so much of intervention required? It is required only because the soil, water and air are not natural. If they are natural, they'll grow automatically. When they grow automatically, let's take it this way. Everybody wants to do farming so that they get the maximum amount of yield. It is a commercial activity. Nobody is growing uh, plants or animals for their own consumption. If there is a dairy, they need to sell the milk. If there is a poultry, they need to sell the eggs or the chickens or whatever, right? So everything is a commercial activity. Now, for a commercial activity, what matters the most? You are doing a commercial activity based on only two factors. What is your input? What is your output? What increases your input cost? The amount of things that you need, come what may, for growing, right? Now today what all you need fertilizers, you need pesticide, you need insecticide, you need herbicide, you need hormones, you need antibiotics. And why are all these things required? Just to safeguard your crop. Now, what is the definition of health you need to understand here? 90% of people are of the opinion today that absence of disease is health. No, it is not. You are as healthy as you can defend any infection that is coming onto you. So your health is dependent on your immunity. Everybody is working on diseases, nobody is working on immunity. Now where does the immunity come from? That is natural. You give a natural environment to any living being, it will develop its own immunity. Now whatever microbes are coming which are infecting animals or plants or anything, they are not coming from outer space. We are creating an environment wherein they can dwell. हम गंदा पानी पिएंगे तो हम बीमार पड़ेंगे. वो पानी गंदा कहाँ से हो रहा है? There are no aliens attacking from Mars or from Jupiter who are injecting atmosphere with these microbes. These microbes have always been there. You must know how to deal with it. And the only way you can develop your own immunity or your plants or your animals' immunity against the possible threats is you give them that natural upbringing, that natural environment. You put a human being in a 6x6 cell for 20 years of life, you think he is going to walk tall when he is released out of that cell? Obviously no, because he did not get the natural resources which were required for growing up. कोई भी बच्चा पैदा होता है तो 2.5-3 kg का होता है और जब मरता है तो वो 70-80 किलो का होता है. तो इतना बड़ा वो हुआ कैसे? We are taking 3 inputs from this planet. One is the air that we are breathing in, second is water, and third is the food. Food, again, if you go one step back, where is the food coming from? Food is coming from either plants or animals. Animals are eating the plants, so ultimately it is coming in from the plants. So what does plant need to grow? Water, air and soil. So ultimately when we are also growing, we need water, air and soil. Now we have killed all of them because of our activities. We've killed the water, we've killed the soil, we've killed the air. And then we want to be healthy and disease free. How is it possible? So ecology is to restore this balance, and this will start from water, because water is the first element from where the life starts. Even on this planet, the first life forms started in water, then it propagated to land, and I'm not talking about the evolution theory of Darwin. I'm talking about the evolution theory which is very Indian, very Vedic, and that you'll find those clues because I firmly believe that Indian scriptures are coded. You need to decode them, and once you decode them, you get your basic knowledge out of it. So this story of evolution start from 10 avatar of Vishnu, start from Matsya avatar, that is the first form. So that is the aquatic life. Then it came to amphibian, which is the Kachap or the tortoise. Then it came to terrestrial, which is the wild boar or the Varaha avatar, right? That's how life propagated. That is the theory of evolution, the Indian way, right? So the first element of life is water. We first need to revive water to make it alive. Once it is alive, then it can correct its own chemistry. Like every living being can correct his or her own chemistry. Like if you have a high blood pressure, you just open up your shoes and you loosen up your belt and you sit in a air conditioned room. There is a physical action which has created a physiological change within your ecosystem, right? Every living being is a chemical factory because my emotions will change the secretion within my body. So if I'm in a happy mood, there is a different chemical being secreted. If I'm angry, there is a different chemical being secreted. So that is a chemistry which is always changing. Same goes true with water. Now, every time you fall sick, you don't just start popping up medicines. So you need to rely on the natural ecological system, which is your human body, and it goes true for the entire planet also. The the moment you go ecological, things started getting sorted out. So when the water is alive, everything from farming to your economy to everything will come back in place. Now this is how the gears of life work. All of them are interlinked, right? Initially we talked about 5 elements: Kshiti, Jal, Pavak, Gagan, Samira. I'm talking about just 3 of them right now. Water is one gear. When water gets alive, it makes the soil ecology and the air ecology also alive. So it starts with water, moves to terrestrial, and finally avian. That is the step. So here plants play a major and important role because they are in a unique position in ecology. They're linking the carbon cycle and the nitrogen cycle. So nitrogen cycle is happening in the soil and the carbon cycle is happening in the air. What leaves are supposed to do is absorb carbon and release oxygen. Carbon is then taken to the roots. Carbon is not required by the plants, it is required by the soil ecology. So they give carbon and they take nitrogen. Nitrogen is captured by the nitrogen fixing bacteria, which has got no use for nitrogen except for doing a barter with the soil roots, right? So it is a barter system that is working in the ecology because there is no currency there. Now this is how they link soil and air, because the leaves are there in the air and roots are there in the soil. So plants are linking both the ecologies together. Now when we first revive the water to life, we use the same alive water on the plants to revive soil and air. That's how it goes. And that's how the problem will be solved. When we have the alive water body or alive water anywhere, even the drain water can be alive, right? Even the sewage treatment plant water can be alive, because in the sewage also 95% of it is pure water. Only 5% is the contaminant, that is the uh, dissolved solid or suspended solid or volatile suspended solid or volatile dissolved solid and blah 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 blah, right? Now we are worried about that 5% and we are spoiling this 95%. If we can make this 95% alive, that 5% will get consumed in the natural process, because the matter will get converted into life, and that is how it will get consumed. That's about the living aqua-ecological ecosystem. And water, in when it is able to purify itself, it is already on the situation wherein it has got two basic ingredients. One is the complete electrolyte balance, and second is the alive food chain, aquatic food chain. Now these two things contribute towards possibly all life forms, because plants need it. It works as a fertilizer and it works as a neuroimmuno booster for the plants, for the animals, even for the human beings, because our body is not designed to extract minerals or electrolytes out of the food that we eat. Our body is designed to get these inputs from the water we drink. And two of the most important systems of our body, one is the endocrine system and second is the neurological system. Both of them work and communicate only on the electrolytes. So if this electrolyte feed is not there, by default my immune system will go weak, and by default my nervous system will go weak. So the response or the mental ailments like Alzheimer's or things like that, they will grow. Now unfortunately, all of us consistently in past about 20 years have been drinking dead water. What we drink is a RO water. Now RO water has got absolutely zero electrolytes. So anyways, that is not the subject today. The subject is to understand that water is living, and if we bring water back to the living conditions, it will sort its own chemical properties and the solid properties, and it will purify itself, and then it will be good to use by all sorts of life forms. That's about it. Any questions? Most welcome. To read more, this is the website cownomics.in.